welcome back. Mike Jones. I'm here with Dr. Brooke Keels. Last episode, we were talking about kind of the order in which to seek help, right? Mm-hmm. If you've identified that there's a problem, there's an issue, the order in which you should proceed. One of the things we were talking about is where most people will start at doctor, probably starting at therapist would be your best route. I would say that that's probably not the only case, the only time. There may be instances when going with the doctor first would be the correct way to go about it.
Right.
What are some instances that you would say, okay, let's look at hospital, let's look at doctor, what goes first there?
So, looking at cases where you would escalate it pretty quickly, probably, or look into... from a medicinal standpoint. I think anytime there's, of course, like suicidal ideation, and it doesn't mean actively suicidal, like, of course, then.
Yes.
Then definitely. Yeah. But, self-harm, anything that's a danger, and I think also kind of looking at, like, if your kid or loved one is not functioning like in a controlled way. And I don't mean like they have anger outbursts. It may be like anger outbursts with like physical aggression or, kind of just these things that we need to handle this very quickly. And then almost like triage it, figure it out, have some stability. So then we can move forward with the healing journey of it. And I think even in those moments though, too, understanding that, taking a medication that helps curb an edge, if you will, isn't healing.
Yes.
Like it's just the start, I think somebody told me this, I'll never forget it. They were like, well, I've been taking my Zoloft and it's just not making me happy. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's not how that, it won't do that. It won't do that at all. So I think managing expectations, even in more urgent situations.
Yes.
Too.
So, okay. I mean, let's talk more about those urgent situations and like what those can look like. Because I think when you're in it as a parent and you're scared, it's easy to feel like everything's urgent.
Right.
Right. Of course, suicidal ideation, self-harm, violence, different, right? Yeah. Like obviously, everybody that works in this field or in the mental health field, and you call them, their voicemail always says, in case of emergency, call, you reached the confidential voicemail of so-and-so.
Right.
In case of emergency, please call 911, right? So in that sense, like we know, I think everyone can kind of say like, okay, well, my son's overdosing. Emergency, right? Call 911.
Right.
Suicidal ideation, self-harm, or even an attempt, call 911. We know, but there's got to be some other instances where we would say, okay, maybe we need to get them to the hospital. Yeah. Waiting to see the therapist is not going to be an option.
For sure. Right? I mean, and I think that it's funny though. I know you say like we know like if something really bad is happening, take them to the hospital. But sometimes people like they just sit in it and they're just like terrified. They're like he just beats up on his siblings or things like we don't have to do that. But there are definitely other instances. I think when you're looking at psychosis, when we're talking about they are not in the same reality that you are, and I don't mean that they have like a different political viewpoint as you. I mean like they are not, they're seeing things and hearing things, and there is a concern there. I think that is pretty urgent. Obviously, and I want to say this too, you can deal with urgent situations in a calm way.
Yes.
Right. So when I say urgent, I don't mean freak out and make it worse like we can tend to do, especially when it's our own kid. Yeah. Right. The way I would respond to a client may be very different than how I would respond when it's my own child. I hope not. I hope I would do a good job. But, I think that, if we're talking about visual, auditory hallucinations, I know you and I have done interventions, before where it's like, this person is not safe to walk around.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes that's hard to pinpoint. I think that's when we talk about having other people in your life to come and be like, can you have a conversation with them? Does this feel off to you?
Yeah.
You know, and being able to have somebody evaluate it. And it can feel scary because I think, you know, it's like, you don't lock me up here, don't leave me here. And that's really scary. But somebody has to be able to safely lay eyes on them and notice what's going on. And especially if you don't know if there's a substance issue.
Yeah.
Like you're not really sure, or maybe you think it's that, but you don't know. And as harsh as, you know, a medical evaluation can sound, like from a hospital standpoint, it is the best way to kind of quickly assess in a safe environment what's maybe going on. You know, if they get better when they're no longer maybe using some things or not.
The LSD is worn off.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. You know, the blue lady went away.
Yeah.
And
well, and then, and I do want to say too that though I said, like everybody knows this, well, the reality is if somebody is making suicidal threats, always take it seriously.
Yeah.
Always take it seriously.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's not serious, take it seriously because you just don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Get them to a professional to get evaluated. They may deem that they're not a threat to themselves.
Yeah.
Better safe than sorry in those situations.
Yeah.
I would say too that things that individuals may not notice, not working in this field and dealing with this, that are the things I'm looking for when I'm talking to somebody to see if they're in psychosis.
Yep.
Number one is, are they tracking conversation? So when we're having a conversation, are they staying online with that conversation, or are they bouncing around and going into all these different branches of that and taking it down rabbit holes that have nothing to do with what we're talking about?
Yes.
And that's something I'm always like, okay, they're able to track conversation. Another thing that I've noticed, and I know this is something that we look for, when talking to somebody and they take really long pauses before answering. Like they may not look directly at you. They may look over to the side and then pause for a long time.
Right.
Is a lot of times a sign of auditory hallucination.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out which voice talking to them is yours.
Right. They are filtering.
Yes.
Yep.
And so those are two things that I look for.
Yeah.
Is this a psychotic episode?
Right.
What are we dealing with?
And even I just want to and you can also be talking about an organic problem, right? There can also be something going on cognitively, like neurologically in the brain, seizures, traumatic brain injuries, like things of that nature. So it's you know, you don't have to like freak out like, oh, this is like we would need to go check it out. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just impairment, right? Somebody's struggling to respond because they're on Xanax.
Right.
And that will slow your motor function, or they've had too much to drink. And so sometimes it's impairment, or they smoked too many dabs, too much weed.
That's what we've seen. Yeah, it used to be meth. Now it's all the weed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I think in some of those instances, better safe than sorry. Like, let's see what's going on. And another one that I would point out is clear manic episodes, right? Like somebody's not sleeping for days. They're bouncing off the walls. You come into their room and they're taking things apart, or they've got these grand ideas and you can tell they seem like they've had way too much caffeine. And you're seeing this for days, not just an hour or 2 hours or whatever. You may need to look at getting something on board right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that can get really dangerous really quick.
Yeah.
And the more, in my experience, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, because I may be, but this is at least from what I understand and my experience working in the field is, the more that individuals are having manic episodes untreated, the worse it gets.
Yes.
So it will progress. So if you're seeing this and you're seeing the pattern, like pay attention to the pattern in it.
Yeah.
I've dealt with bipolar individuals where the pattern was 4 hours, right? They're high highs, manic for 4 hours, crash 4 hours later, and we're seeing this super rapid cycling like that.
Yes.
I've had other individuals that I've seen that have been like month, long term, episodes with it. But
And then they may be
those.
fine for a few months. And then, but yes, but you're right. Like they typically start to bleed into each other.
Yes.
And especially because often I think the more and more someone is manic, the more and more they like it.
Yes.
And they often do not want to take their medication because it feels really good to be manic.
Yes.
You know?
But they don't want is the depressive side of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, and sure.
Yeah, they hit the depressive side and they're like, okay, I'll take the meds.
Yeah.
And then they went off again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
and we'll often try and get off to hit the manic side. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that's where it gets really complicated. It's almost like you're doing this long enough to like it.
Yeah.
And that's when I get really nervous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just for someone, if you will. Yeah.
No, absolutely. But yeah, the patterns are important to notice, right? Yeah. And maybe what you're noticing more is the depressive side of it, not the manic side. And you think, oh, well, they're happy, you know, so everything's good. But that is the mania. And then you see them slip into the depression.
Right.
You just pay attention to those patterns in your loved ones.
Yeah.
It's not, well, I know it's not as easy to see when you're right in it. So like, you've got to
and I think when you're assessing it, like you're paying attention, how are they engaging with the world?
Yeah.
Right. So whether that's the manic side, and yes, sometimes it's like, oh, you're not okay. But even on the depressive side, I think can be a lot more difficult because you're like, well, they're low, but typically it's like they're not getting out of bed, they're not engaging in life and, you know, connecting with friends and family and things of that nature, and it's getting progressively getting worse. And another thing I would add, and it can kind of go with any of the things you just lined out, is paranoia. I think when the paranoia starts coming in, you know, and I say people are out to get me, but that can sound and look a lot of different ways, you know, but if they begin questioning people's intentions toward them, people that you would never do that, you know, with, that begins to be really concerning. And, you know, years ago, that's not something you'd really see unless it was with like pretty bad mental health stuff. But now, again, we're seeing it with THC users more than ever, more than anyone, frankly. And it's not just in the midst of use, it's residuals from use. But yeah, the paranoia, and that's another one too that typically will progressively get worse and that's a problem because they need to trust somebody so you can help get them the help they need without it hopefully being, you know, police involved in like all those things, which sometimes that's just what has to happen. And you and I've been a part of those, and then they're very upset at the time, but then they get stable and they're very grateful. You know, at the end of it, it's hard though. It's hard for families.
It's hard. Well, and it's hard to tell too nowadays. Is it substance or is it a mental health problem? I mean, because we are seeing it with THC, and it's more common now than ever. Seeing the paranoia and the psychosis. You know, I mean, it used to be. There's such thing as like cocaine-induced psychosis, something I'm very familiar with. That comes, and methamphetamine obviously is something that causes that. Now with the THC added to it, we're seeing it way more than ever.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there's no more like, well, it's just weed or it's just whatever. It's like now everything is just 10 times worse. So,
well, I hope that clears some of this stuff up with it, because I don't want to make it seem like, oh, hey, don't ever go to the doctor, because there's times when you need to go to a hospital, you need to go to a doctor.
Yeah,
it's like triage. Like we've got to go. We've got to stop the bleeding, and then we can work on healing.
Absolutely.
You know? And figure out where we go from there.
And I think just to wrap that up, the hope is that you can stay balanced with it. Again, like it can be urgent and you can move quickly without, you know, being in fear and escalating the situation. And there's also sometimes a tendency to excuse these things away. And I just want to encourage people to be confident in taking things seriously without, you don't have to be dramatic with it. Usually life is quite dramatic enough for all of us.
Well, and you'll escalate them.
Yeah,
that'll just create more of a problem.
Won't be good for anybody.
One of my mentors always used to say, like, you got to be like a duck, you know, calm and cool on the surface, paddling like hell underwater. Like,
It's good.
We've got to take the action. We've got to move our feet, but we've got to stay calm and cool, even keeled.
Yep.
Don't raise your voice. Don't panic.
Yes.
Don't start running around. It's
Don't
just
do
gonna,
that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just going to cause more problems.
Move slow.
Yeah, whatever
slowly.
the next step is, make it not a big deal.
Yeah.
This is not a big deal.
Yeah.
Hey, we're gonna go get checked out.
Yep.
Nothing. We love you.
Yeah. Yep.
Super calm about it.
Yeah.
'Cause it
And then
can-
when they're safe, you can then freak out appropriately with support.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, all right. Thanks for your time, everybody. See you soon.